Beyond is sponsored by the Malone Society, whose works help keep alive the plays we work on. The Malone Society regularly publishes volumes of early plays which otherwise might not be available. To join the Society or find out more about their publications, go to malonesociety.com for more information. Hello and welcome to the Beyond Podcast, and today we are going to be looking at a play. We often look at plays, it's always fun. We're going to be looking at, possibly in excessive detail, at a play of Jocasta from the 1560s, and a new edition that is coming into the world, either in the future or the past, depending on what point I drop this podcast and what point it comes into the world. But I have with me a wonderful guest to talk all about the play and the edition coming up. My wonderful guest, who are you and what is your purpose in life?
I am Carla Suthren, and I'm a tutor in English at St Anne's College in Oxford. And I wouldn't say Gascoigne is my purpose in life, but I'm a relatively recent convert, in fact. I sort of spent a lot more time with him over the last couple of years than I had before, and I've become very interested in him. I'm quite pro-Gascoigne these days.
Ah, yes, Gorgeous George, as we like to call him. When we did our first look exploring session, the waves of joy around George were high. We'd just read Symposias, so it was like we did that, then we did this, and everyone's going, oh, my, and they were sort of going, there were some other writers writing this as well. But George, there was a bit of a love-in. It may have died off a little bit when we did Glass of Government, but that's a separate issue.
Understandably, although I am also a bit of an advocate for Glass of Government. I think it's better than people think it is.
I think it is as well. I think basically if you just take out the bits where the students say, please, sir, could you read the textbook out to me, please?
Right.
If you take those bits out and just put a sign up saying 4 hours later, then
Exactly.
The rest of the play functions perfectly well.
Exactly. I imagine, if you were staging it, having a clock with the, the second.
Exactly that.
Really fast.
Exactly that. Because it is like there's a perfectly normal play in here, and then there's the stuff he just clearly wants to get out of his system.
Yeah.
Go to the first and second look exploring sessions for those plays on our YouTube channel to find out why we're saying these things, because I'm not going to explain any of the context now. So this play, Jocasta, you're editing it now. So how did that come about and who's it for?
It goes back to my PhD, which was on the reception of Euripides in the 16th and 17th centuries. So I come at it kind of through my interest in Greek tragedy and what people were thinking about Greek tragedy, what they knew about it, whether it was ever kind of staged, etc., etc. So in my PhD, I had a little bit, obviously, on Jocasta. Slightly on complimentary, actually. I think at the time I hadn't quite got a handle on it. And I remember quoting a bit of it just to sort of compare it to Jane Lumley's translation of Euripides and Iphigenia, and kind of implicitly going, isn't Lumley so much better?
Yeah. Do you feel repentance now?
I don't, I feel repentance because they're both good in their different ways. But I think I hadn't really kind of got to grips with what I wanted to do with it. I had a lot of questions about it, particularly in terms of its relationship, if any, to Euripides, and on things like, coming across people talking about it as being Senecan and going, well, what does that really mean? I think we throw around Senecan as a term quite a lot without really being very precise about what that might mean for us, what that might have meant for Renaissance audiences, which may not be quite the same thing, etc. And then I started writing a piece on the commonplace marks, in fact, in it. So one of the interesting features about Jocasta, which is not unique to it by any means, it's a common sort of early modern typographical device, is these little sort of things that look like quotation marks on one side of the margins, which pick out like particularly sententious bits of wisdom that you might want to kind of extract right down in your commonplace book and then quote when the occasion arises.
Over dinner,
Yes.
Make yourself sound terribly clever with these things.
Exactly.
They are deeply irritating from an actor's point of view, because it's like people just go, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's nothing, it's fine, just ignore it.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where, there's been sort of scholarship on does the presence of these marks in a play text indicate that it's being presented as a kind of literary work in this kind of printed form or indeed manuscript form. So I started doing some research into the use of commonplace marks in drama. And what I became very interested in was the fact that, again, people were sometimes sort of referring to these as being, it's a sort of connection to Seneca again, because Seneca is very sententious and contains lots of these things. But actually, when looking at the printed texts in the period, by 1568, which is the date probably of the earliest manuscript that we have of Jocasta, there's been only one edition of Seneca which has commonplace marks. Other editions, they do indicate when there's a really nice quotable bit, but they do it by putting it in italics or putting it in capitals or something else. Whereas the majority of editions of Euripides and Sophocles do it using commonplace marks. So I was kind of trying to suggest that actually these are sort of a visual gesture to an idea of how you might present Greek tragedy rather than Senecan tragedy in this period. And they're not in Dolce, which is the immediate source for the play either. So anyway, that was kind of my way into it. And then, so we're editing it for the MHRA Tudor and Stuart Translations series, which I got involved with thanks to Elena Spinelli, who brought me on board for her project to edit Lumley's Iphigenia, which we're working on at the moment. And yes, and then I got a postdoc in Verona where I was working with Silvia Bigliazzi, and she was also working on Jocasta. So it turned into a collaboration, which obviously was also very helpful from the point of view that my Italian is definitely improving, but probably not good enough to tackle Dolce all on my own just yet.
Yes. So the play itself, I mean, when we did our first look, I just realised, I listed it as translated from Dolce, homeopathically connected to Euripides, which was an ongoing sort of discussion about how do these sources sort of function. And for anyone sort of wanting to know what the play is basically about, it's about how Thebes is really, really screwed. That's basically what the play is about, and it does all of the stuff from Oedipus through to Antigone in ways that aren't always... The thing about Greek myths is they're not always the same depending on your interpretation. So in some iterations, Jocasta is quite dead by the point this play happens. In other versions, she's still very much alive, in fact, as is Oedipus, and so different versions, depending on what the play is trying to do, either kill off or keep various characters. But it does the whole Seven at Thebes narrative through to Antigone, and then also takes us in a slightly different direction to what most Antigones end on. So that's sort of the outline for the play. So it's packing in a lot of plot, and it's a translation of this work. So could you tell me a little bit about the origin story of this text?
Yeah, so I guess precisely the thing that attracts Renaissance readers to Euripides' Phoenician Women is exactly that kind of comprehensiveness, which is also the thing that we don't like about it now. So when we think about the Theban story, as you were kind of suggesting, we tend to think about Sophocles' so-called Theban cycle, the sort of three plays that deal with it. And we don't really turn to Euripides' Phoenician Women as our first port of call. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jocasta, this play, has been neglected to an extent, is because it's not a Greek tragedy that sort of appeals to modern tastes in the way that it did to 16th century tastes. And as I said, I think one reason for that appeal is that they really like the comprehensiveness. It's they sort of Renaissance readers comment positively on the fact that it kind of gets so much into it.
There's a parallel to, there's the play Peripodorum Secunda, which is again another version of Greek tragedy where it's just like, let's put everything in, including all the offstage. But it's like, oh, we got some Senecas, let's just whack them together and let's add this bit and do this, and clearly the students really like doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like, you don't need to read the rest because you can just read this one and it's got it all there. And this one as well, so Dolce, who is responsible for the Italian kind of adaptation of the text, he's working from a Latin translation of the play, and he sort of adapts it for the Italian stage. And he actually grafts in a scene from Seneca's Oedipus, the kind of sacrifice of the goat, which somewhat madly takes place in the middle. That's kind of imported with a difference from a Senecan play as well. So again, that kind of compendiousness of getting everything in.
And again, how literal are we taking this goat? It's like Wiggins puts it down in the props list of like goat. It's just like, yeah, how far are we going with this, people?
Yeah. And of course, the fascinating thing about that is it's a question for Seneca as well. We don't know. I mean, it's not actually a goat in Seneca. It's a different animal. So changing it into a goat, I think, is quite an interesting decision because it does suggest that they're kind of making a sort of allusion to the derivation of tragedy from, goat song in Greek, which is quite a popular sort of etymology if you're thinking about tragedy in this period. We don't know the circumstances of kind of if and whether and how Seneca's plays might have A, been staged at all, or B, staged an actual sacrifice if they were doing it. And similarly, we just have no idea what might have been done in the English play or in Dolce's play, really. I guess the only thing we can be certain of is that it would have been spectacular, whatever it was that they did. This is a performance which is really interested in visual spectacle.
And is the Ludovico Dolce's version as spectacular as the version that we get at Grains Inn?
So that's a really good question. I guess one aspect which is potentially different is that certainly in the printed text, as Gascoigne and Kinwelmersh had it, there are no dumb shows. So these are kind of an additional aspect of kind of visual spectacle between the acts. Or before each act, in fact, which are added. And they seem to be probably inspired by the similar dumb shows in Gorboduc, which is an earlier Inns of Court play, which Jocasta is very much kind of in dialogue with in a few ways, I think. Having said that, one of the things that I think is interesting in our edition that we're including is an appendix, which has a description of a later performance of Dolce's Jocasta in Italy in 1570, where they had these interact kind of emblematic, spectacular interludes, which are very much along the lines of what the English dumb shows do. So certainly there are no textual traces of whether or not that was the case in the original production, but they may have been there. We don't know.
Yeah, and this sort of this use of dumb show. I mean, you mentioned Gorboduc, and but it does seem to be a thing that becomes a semi-convention. And it also an additional job as in these student productions where someone might write the play, or someone's may write the play text, but someone might be in charge of the dumb shows, and they're writing the dumb shows, and presumably they're the ones who like organising canon, and. And the spectacle, because it is considering other dumb shows, it's a big ask that they're putting on stage here.
Yeah, these are pretty high octane. They really throw a lot at them. As you said, you have kind of rounds of ordnance being fired off before kind of symbolic battle scenes take place. And the first one is kind of this very emblematic scene of Fortune driving across the stage in a chariot, and it comes back at the end, etc. So there's the sort of visual spectacle is absolutely massive, and definitely also requires both the play and I think the dumb shows require a kind of trapdoor scenario on the stage somehow. There needs to be a sort of lower level, because there's one in which someone has to jump into a pit, which then kind of closes up after him. So they must have had some quite sophisticated staging and scenery and devices and everything.
Well, yeah, and again, there's always this slight question with this of the gap between intention and reality. Whether the dumb shows are sort of that this is what I'd like, as opposed to what they actually were able to do. And also, because it's a student show, we also must allow for the possibility that what they actually did was a bit rubbish. It looks great on paper, but it's a question of how much of that is actually practical, and how much of it is giving the effect that they're aiming for. I think we can see the effect they're aiming for here. whether they actually were able to achieve it, it's fairly moot. But it's interesting about the scale of ambition, and that's again speaks to sort of student drama. This ambition of what they're trying to do. It's not like the professional playmakers who are going, okay, this is our repertoire. This is they kind of know what they can do, whereas students don't necessarily.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, and one of the sort of later Inns of Court plays, which is in its printed version, Tancred and Gismond, the dumb shows as they appear in there do not seem to be actually what happened. They seem to be
because they're from the later printed edition, not from the manuscript that survived contemporaneously. Yes, we were literally we have a discussion episode on that, which I recorded a couple of days ago. So Tancred is very much in my mind. I love Tancred.
Me too.
The dumb shows are great, and I really want the printed version to be a witness to things that did happen, rather than just something he made up later on, because they're great.
They are great. And they're interestingly different to the Jocasta Gorboduc ones, where the Jocasta Gorboduc ones are very sort of symbolic, and they tell you that they give you an important kind of message through kind of symbolism, really. And then the Tancred and Gismond ones are actually advancing the plot. They're kind of filling in missing scenes, as it were, that aren't sort of shown to you. So they're quite different.
But again, and they're also much more scalable. They're sort of see, okay, you've got people rising and falling and things, but and again, the symbolism in Gorboduc is relatively straightforward in terms of what it's trying. You've got to do there. Whereas again, the ambition for Jocasta is just enormous. It really is off the scale.
I think one suggestion, it's not necessarily a suggestion that they were definitely kind of staged and really impressive as they were staged, but that first dumb show where you get the representation of ambition with Sesostris driving this chariot, which is drawn by these kings, does seem to make a reappearance in Marlowe's Tamburlaine. And Marlowe himself would have been too young, or even not even born. I can't remember. He
exists.
Does he? Okay.
I don't think he's cognizant of current theatrical trends, however.
Probably not. But of course, he could have read the descriptions of the dumb shows, or other people who may have seen the production would still be alive. So it's
Well, it's also the thing. Once you've got a chariot, I bet they use it every year. You know what props are like. So it's been stagified by some people, and because we're working with neoclassical tragedy here, there's an act structure, so there's a nice, neat division of labour. Got 5 acts and dumb shows. Who's writing what?
So the majority of the play is split between George Gascoigne and Francis Kinwelmersh, who are clearly friends at Gray's Inn. Gascoigne, he writes the sort of largest portion of the play. He's responsible for acts 2, 3, and 5, and Kinwelmersh does acts 1 and 4. And we know this because they sign at the bottom of the acts. Well, it is written at the bottom of the acts who's done each one. And that's the case in the manuscript and in the printed texts. And then the epilogue is done by Christopher Yelverton, who's also involved in various other kind of literary activities at the Inns of Court. Later on, he contributes to The Misfortunes of Arthur. I think he's one of the people who does the dumb shows. There's a few of them who do the dumb shows for that one. So it's possible he may also be involved in the dumb shows for Jocasta if that's his thing. We're not told, but he definitely wrote the epilogue. So Gascoigne, I think, is a really interesting character. He's sort of the soldier poet before Philip Sidney, if that makes sense. He kind of becomes a bit of an icon. I think his reputation really reaches its zenith a bit after he's died.
Well, again, like Philip Sidney.
Again, like Sidney, yeah. And it's really going strong kind of by the turn of the century. There's a bit of he really has a kind of following, I think. Yeah, and he is very interesting. He's quite impecunious. He's involved in various lawsuits. He marries his wife before she's got divorced from her previous husband, I think.
Bit awkward.
He goes to fight in the Netherlands for a bit. Yeah, he's in prison for debt for a while. He becomes an MP. But in terms of his kind of literary journey, the thing that he's often known for is kind of adopting this stance of the reformed prodigal. Gillian Austen is very, very good on this. And I think it used to be taken very much at face value that he sort of reached a point in his life where he turned away from his younger, frivolous poetry and towards this kind of moralistic style. And the Glass of Government, which we already mentioned, is kind of an example of that. But actually, I think now we'd see it more as this is a sort of stance that he's adopting, not completely consistently. And actually, he does still continue to produce other forms of literary production, which are not necessarily as moralistic, much later as well. And I think the other thing that's interesting about Gascoigne, I mean, Gascoigne is the reason we have the play in print. And it's very much part of his kind of literary self-fashioning project. He prints it in his 1573 kind of collection, 100th Sundry Flowers, which is, he presents as being by various authors, but actually it's really only Jocasta within it, which is really by various authors, and everything else is by him. There are subsequent printed editions, which he kind of rearranges in different ways.
And he's very interested in just the nature of verse, the nature of, he's part of this movement of going, what are we doing with English verse?
Yeah.
People who really are sort of struggling to create something that they think is worthy of that classical example, and trying to find ways to and reaching forward, which will pay dividends in drama further down the line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He writes certain notes of instruction concerning the making of verse or rhyme in English, and in that he includes the first, what's generally credited as being the first known reference to rhyme royal by that name, which is really interesting.
Yes, sort of codifying and analysing what's gone before and looking ahead to what might happen in the future. And there's a number of people doing the same sort of job of work around the same time. It is a bit of a movement of people just sort of comparing notes and going, God, we've got to do something, guys. This just Europe thinks this stuff's not very good.
Yeah, and so what's then interesting about that is that of course, for Gascoigne, as for many others, it's very much bound up in these translation projects. So Gascoigne, you mentioned the Supposes, he's translating that from Ariosto, and then he's translating with Kinwelmersh Jocasta from Dolce. This is kind of coming via Italian. And so then what's quite interesting about this is that Dolce does seem to be having a bit of a moment at the Inns of Court around the 1560s. Also, probably around 1566, we've got Gismund of Salerne, the earlier version of Tancred and Gismund. And the prologue for that is kind of the first 12 to 14 lines are pinched directly from Dolce's prologue to his Dido play, as is the entire concept of having kind of Cupid speaking.
Yes, vampire Cupid, as we like.
Yeah. So clearly Dolce is kind of circulating at this point. And yet they don't make any mention that this is a translation from Dolce. They say it's a translation from Euripides. So what they seem to be interested in, and what they seem to think their audience will be interested in, is not actually Dolce, but the access that Dolce kind of gives them to an idea of Greek tragedy which has already been adapted for the contemporary stage. So you don't have to do anything more to it, because Dolce has already put it into a kind of 5-act structure, which Euripides doesn't naturally fall into, at least in this instance.
No. Briefly, before we move to something else, because there is a manuscript as well as print, how similar and how different are they?
So they are quite similar, which is useful. We decided to use the manuscript as our copy text, partly because it is the earliest, partly because there hasn't been an edition based on the manuscript so far. Yes,
because we've only had access to the printed version, so that's the one we know.
Yeah, in terms of the text, they are very similar. The manuscript is a very good text in general. It has a couple of things which are clearly wrong, but only a couple. One of the reasons that I sort of wanted to use it was because it was, well, we don't know exactly the circumstances under which the manuscript was produced, but it was owned by Roger North, and he writes 68 in the corner, which is usually interpreted as being he kind of got hold of it in 1568. And the point is, it's not a Gascoigne project, as it were. It is a collaborative project at that stage between Gascoigne, Kinwelmersh, and at the end Yelverton. When it turns into print, Gascoigne then kind of revises it. So he does make revisions, even though they're quite minor, to all of the text, including his own parts, including Kinwelmersh's parts, including Yelverton's part. So in a way, we kind of wanted to go back to the manuscript just to uncover some of these tiny readings. They may not be big differences, but just to restore some of that kind of authorial agency to his collaborators as well as himself, if that sort of makes sense. So those are they're very minor things. They're just kind of like a word here and there or whatever. But we thought that was interesting. The other main change that takes place, so there are some stage directions which are in the manuscript but not in the printed text, or vice versa, which probably suggests that the manuscripts, the sort of authorial manuscripts that the scribe and the printers were working from, like maybe the stage directions were quite, they were sort of all over the place, or they'd been added in, or they were a bit confusing to read or something, which results in some ending up in some places and not in others. The printed texts also add notes in the margins, which are often kind of sort of slightly moralizing in tone. There's a bit where female virtue is being talked about, and the marginal note reads a glass for young ladies and things like that. Actually, the marginal notes are quite interested in this idea of the kind of the glass aspect, the sort of mirror for magistrates, which I think the play is also interested in as well. And the authorship of these notes is not really known. We don't know if they were by Gascoigne or by someone else. It's a bit unclear. So that's also kind of an interesting feature of the printed texts, which you don't get in the manuscript.
So, students at Gray's Inn producing this, how are they doing it? How much can we infer, guess, or have evidence for?
So I was
sigh there.
I was hoping I'd be able to find out more about this than I actually could when writing the introduction. Essentially, a lot of the answer is kind of we don't know. I guess what we can say is that from the plays that we have and from the knowledge about particularly important Christmas revels periods, like the ones in 1561, 1562, which is the occasion for which Gorboduc was produced.
When someone important turns up, basically.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a monarch visiting, if there's a kind of ambassador of something or other, then they're going to pull out all the stops, and they clearly do have a lot of resources to throw at these kinds of entertainments. Unfortunately, we can't be very precise even about what occasion Jocasta was produced for. The general critical assumption tends to be that it was Christmas revels with analogy to Gorboduc, but there's no hard evidence for that. Supposes we're also told was done in 1566. And it seems likely because it was quite common to do sort of a tragedy and a comedy. So it does seem fairly plausible that they were produced for the same occasion. I was trying to narrow it down. If we kind of go, is it a revels period? I was trying to narrow it down within that. But actually, the revels period kind of potentially lasts from like the end of October all the way through to goodness knows when, like sometime in February. So it doesn't narrow it down a lot.
February, that's optimistic. I mean, this is the thing. It's like celebrating Christmas. It's like, when does the 12th night doesn't necessarily mean they stop. Actually, if you're in your higher echelons, it's just like, hey, when the party's got going, there's a reason why there are plays explicitly about, hi, Lent's coming. Could you stop partying now?
Yeah.
There are explicit things where people are saying,
please stop. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is the thing, like, because with the dating as well, yes, it says 1566, but then of course dating is confusing at this point because the New Year starts on Lady Day officially, so that could mean any time up to like March 1567 anyway. I think I got from Gillian Austin that there may also have been revels for Ascension Day, which is the 26th of May in 1566. I had to look that up in some calendars. So yeah, basically we cannot really narrow down when exactly it might have been performed. Again, the assumption seems to be that it would have been performed in the Great Hall at Gray's Inn. Again, sort of probably based on analogy really with other productions that we do know the location.
Do we know what
would.
sort of size that space is, or was? I don't know. Is it still an extant structure, or has it changed?
The hall itself, I think, is. I don't want to make claims that I have no basis for, but I believe the hall itself is still there, but the internal structures may not be quite the same within it. I think that's my understanding. If all of the stage directions are to be believed in Jocasta, you have to have a lot of people on stage at various points. So it must have been quite a big performing area. I think, again, so the two people I'm drawing on here most are J.W. Cunliffe and Bruce Smith, who've kind of written about the potential staging of the play. And I think they tend to think that there was a sort of scaffold stage built in the hall, especially for productions. We do know that happened with university drama as well. So that does seem plausible. And that would kind of allow them to make sure that there was a sort of trapdoor space that could be used, etc.
I mean, it's the complication. It's the dumb shows, because it's like the play itself is relatively straightforward. It's the dumb shows that create this headache. And also, just speaking of headaches, you've got trumpets indoors. I mean, it's a terrible idea. and cannons, all this stuff that it just seems so. Because when we were doing our initial read, we were sort of just talking about how would we stage it. We go outdoors. Do it outdoor. For the love of God, do it outdoors. Because of the complexity that the dumb shows add to the staging. And I mean, again, this is where the question of, well, they're students, therefore they're not necessarily thinking wholly practically about what is going to be effective and what's not.
Sure.
And as I say, the size of the space really matters here, because what size audiences will be packed in. But, how much space can you give to the stage to make that happen? And did they cram in as many physical bodies onto the stage as the script suggests? Or was it just Rafe with a hat? I am the army. Hi. And those sort of questions. Because I think that's where knowing a good idea of the dimension of the stage would be really, really helpful. Because then we could actually do some practice. What's its maximum dimensions that it could be, to actually then play with that, because I'd quite like to do that, actually. Just say, how much room do you need to do this? Because I can spin on many a sixpence, but this play is really asking for quite a lot of spinning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is the thing. This play needs to be staged. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One of them is because I think you have to read out the verse in order to get a sense of why it's good. I think if you just read it on the page, it's actually quite hard to grasp. And people have had, I think, a lack of interest in the play, partly because they're just encountering it first of all, in non-modernized texts, in texts which are kind of a little bit hard to, or confusing to read for various reasons. But also just reading it kind of you don't get what the language is doing. This
is a constant problem we have with neoclassical drama. I mean, when the first look we did, all of the actors, and a lot of them were actually actors rather than just readers, are just going, "This is great. This is really good stuff." I think once you get through Act 1, I think that there was a bit of struggle.
Understandable.
But after that, it was just going, "This is so good." And just that sense when you're not looking, because the thing about a play is nobody in the audience knows how long a speech is until it's over.
Yeah.
And the problem with actors is they pick up a script and go, "Oh, yeah, that's long," and take a horrible in-breath and start. Yeah. So this is a constant battle I'm always having, of just going, no, you know what, audiences and actors really actually do. We do neoclassical. We try to do one every year, just to remind everyone that this stuff. It's not easy, but it does work.
Yeah, and I think the other factor in there is these dumb shows, because the fact is, as kind of scholars and critics, we make quite a lot of judgments about what dumb shows do or don't do, or how they might disrupt or distract or complement, or how audiences might respond to them. We've never seen them. And it changes completely when you see something staged. Like, we all kind of know that. But we're talking about these essentially blind, because we never see anybody try to do them, essentially. So I would just love to see a production of Jocasta which literally did that, which kind of went, okay, how much space was there available? What kind of staging is possible here? How many, can you actually have sort of Jocasta Eteocles, Polynices, 29 attendants, the full chorus, can you actually fit them all on this stage?
Can you get them on and off again?
Yeah.
That is my big thing of just what are the entrances, and because you can fit a lot of people on a small stage.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, but how do you get them off again?
Yeah. And it's one of the interesting things about, it's one of the weird mysteries of Jocasta, which I am yet to solve, is they're very specific about naming the gates. The two gates that they are using, which are the stage doors, are the gates Electrae and the gates Homoloides. Now, there are various, in sort of various Greek sources, there are different versions of exactly what all of the 7 gates of Thebes were named, but these are 2 of the 7 gates of Thebes. They are in Euripides. They are not in Dolce. Dolce does not include the names of these gates. So where on earth did they get the names of these gates from? And why did they choose these 2? It doesn't really make any sense. And I haven't found anything really enlightening about that. But what it does suggest is that they have a very clear sense of the stage space that they have, that it has these 2 entrances on either side, and it has the door to get into the palace in the middle. So we can be quite clear about that, at least. So we mentioned Philip Sidney, and he's got the kind of next generation Gascoigne style soldier poet. So he could actually have been in the audience for Jocasta. He was only about 12, but he enrolled actually at Gray's Inn at about that, or at the Inns of Court. Was it Gray's Inn specifically? I can't remember. At about that time. So he could have been there. He may have been in the audience. And in the Defense of Poetry, which obviously he's writing much later, he has this line where he says, "What child is there that coming to a play and seeing Thebes written in great letters upon an old door doth believe that it is Thebes?" And I just really love the idea that maybe buried in there is a memory of seeing a tragedy set in Thebes.
Well, I mean, it speaks to... Okay, that sets a number of hairs because, later boys' company plays and to a degree playhouse plays will use signs explicitly to indicate where things are. Certainly there's a number of boys' company plays where people come on and say, oh, there's a big sign saying Rome. I think we're in Rome. Are we in Rome? Yes, we are. And so maybe, again, this elaborate staging of here are the big doors to the gates of Thebes, or maybe they just put a sign up over the door.
Oh, totally. I mean, it has been suggested that maybe, because again, one of the weird mysteries about this gates Electrae and gates Homoloides is I don't think they're actually referred to in the text of the play at all. So, by those names. It's only the stage directions which specify the names. So why would you be so insistent on specifying the names unless you did have them, to refer to potentially on stage? So maybe the central door said Thebes. Maybe the gates on either side were labelled Electrae and Homoloides. Who knows what exactly that kind of looked like in practice? I mean, I think the general thinking is often that this is the fairly typical 3-stage buildings as the backdrop to the playing space.
But then also, where's your tiring house? Because if you've got 40 people coming on and off stage, where do they go off stage? Yeah. So you need to be arranging the stage at an end where there is also another room they can use.
Yeah.
And it's got to be nearby. How are you queuing it? Where are you putting the musicians? Are they portable, or do they need to go somewhere?
Absolutely, and there are a lot of musical instruments specified for these dumb shows.
So again, the musicians have to go somewhere. They are physical presences, and so I do the same sort of maths I used to do with drawing room comedy, which I call sofa mechanics, which is it's all very well to put all the furniture on that stage, but where do you put the actors?
Yeah.
So where are you putting the chariot? How are you getting a chariot on and off that stage? And say that's when we were reading it, and just talking about how we would do. Going, you don't pull it on a stage. It's a terrible idea. You might have a bit of stage that's raised so you can do the trap effect, but actually you've got 3 locuses that you're working with. Okay.
Yeah.
The gates of the city are sort of irrelevant. They're more dumb show areas and places to come on and off from, but they're not really places in the sense that your central palace is your central area of import.
Yeah.
And how does that work? So that could be semi-raised, but actually the rest could be on a flat, potentially with steps up to the palace and the raised area where you could then have a trap.
And where do you put the chorus is the question that I'm really interested in. Is
how many chorus?
So I think there are 4.
Yeah.
I think there are 4. Like it's become a convention already by this point. And one of the things that I've been working on recently, which I think is really interesting from this point of view, is that I was able to identify the names of people who acted in a production of Euripides' Hecuba in Erasmus's Latin translation, associated with All Souls College in about between 1538 and 1542, around that sort of time. And they already have decided that the chorus is going to be 4 people. So then in all of these kind of later Inns of Court plays, they usually specify that there are 4 who are the chorus, but that seems to already be a kind of convention by the time we get to this stage. So there are 4 of them. Where are they? Are they kind of all grouped together? Are they spread out? Are they sort of slightly separate from the action? Are they kind of coming forward when they have their interactions? I really don't know. But they are, if you're going to have a chorus around, again, you have to have space for them. You have to have thought that through, like exactly how they're going to relate to the rest of the play and the rest of the space.
Well, it's also rehearsal methods as well. How compartmentalized, because I haven't done this analysis, but how compartmentalized are the various units of action in the sense of you've got people who are presumably busy doing other things. How are they rehearsing? How are they learning their text? How are they interacting with everybody else? So the chorus are, in a sense, more of a through line than anything else. The dumb shows could be mostly rehearsed separately. So how do you pull all those pieces together? Because it's not functioning in quite the same way as a later Playhouse dramas would, where the acting company, will know their business, and can, they still do rehearse, but they rehearse in a different way. Whereas here, you have the opportunity for something we might call rehearsals, and someone who is a bit like a director actually pulling it all together. And it's interesting, who's doing that and in what way, because these aren't professionals, and how they work. Is there an established university way, or the Inns of Court way of working, and same for universities, other universities as well? All of which are good questions of which we don't necessarily know answers to.
With Jocasta as well, and the kind of the lavish spectacle of it. In some ways, it makes you think a lot more of the sort of Jacobean court masque kind of thing that was required for all of that. But of course, that was a kind of professionalized organization to some extent, in that you've got the Ben Jonson, Inigo Jones collaboration. You've got they figure out what they're doing and they get better and better at it, etc.
Well, and you have the resources of the Rebels Office. And it's the kind of thing that was still happening up until about now with the Rebels Office in terms of court performance then. It's only Elizabeth being a bit stingy that kind of court performance kind of dies out for a while, and that's why, and to the benefit of the professional stage, basically. It's like, let's outsource this to other people and pay them less money. Yay! So yes, and just speaking on staging it, I mean, we'll definitely do an audio adaptation. We may record it live, which wouldn't necessarily involve excessive dumb shows, but it's always a step forward towards making a staging happen. And if people want it to happen, then just get in touch or become a patron. Give us money. We will, bribe us, and we will make it happen. But definitely, what we could do is we could definitely do some workshops, just trying to figure out the practicalities of staging. You don't necessarily need all of the bodies to figure out the maths of the bodies, and actually just saying, okay, what are the potential sizes of the space available? And that's just a little bit of research to get that number, and then find a convenient space where we could actually figure out the maths, and that would take an afternoon.
Yeah,
that's very doable, actually, frankly.
And once you if you actually strip away all of the extra stuff that we are told was happening, the fundamentals of it are the fundamentals of a Greek tragedy, which is basically not really more than 3 people on stage talking to each other at any one time.
And as an audio adaptation for the podcast, it is a doddle. It really is. I mean, we just need to get our best verse speakers in play and just have at the text, because it's it is. I just really want to reiterate this point. It's really, really well written. This is really good stuff, especially Gascoigne. I do think Francis isn't quite as, is demonstrative. I think the connective tissue in his later act is better than in Act 1.
Yeah.
I think Act 1 is. But the problem with Act 1, it's all set up, and it
Yeah.
feels like a bit of an outlier. It's just not as engaging in the same way as later on. Once the plot gets moving, then you start going, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean this is a kind of criticism which is leveled at Euripides' play as well. In fact, even one of the ancient kind of little hypotheses, they call them, to the play, which are sometimes like arguments, but sometimes are just kind of judgments.
Yeah.
One of those ancient hypotheses kind of says that the bit with Antigone looking down from the walls over the army is just kind of it's external to the rest of the play. It's sort of stitched on to no purpose, and the bit with Oedipus as well at the end. So yeah, these criticisms were kind of already being made in antiquity about some of that sort of opening bit. And I think what Dolce tries to do with it a little bit is, so in the Greek play, it's just Jocasta who speaks this kind of opening speech. And his kind of introduction of her actually talking to someone, I think, is an attempt to make it sort of more engaging for what he sort of wants to do with it. Of course, that's not to say, Dolce elsewhere sort of uses single prologue speakers, as we've mentioned. But yeah, he's sort of trying to think about what to do with it, I think, Dolce, in the first bit. But you can sort of, yeah, for us, it really gets going later on, I think.
Yeah, and there are ways and means to make that work. I mean, I suspect actually that the audience, a modern audience, will need 5 minutes to get their brain tuned in anyway. So it's fine if there's a little extraneous matter. It's not the end of the world. And so I think just you could trim it back. I mean, this is the thing: is there are different ways of producing it. Obviously we're an audio company. We'd like to do it physically as well. I think it would probably sell perfectly well. I think Greek tragedy and its variants, there is a decent market for it. That there's a sort of research and action version where you are looking about the staging of its original version, but I think there's also a very, very good modern staging which takes a whole series of liberties with the original text. I think it's very doable and play aroundable, and I commend that to anyone out there who fancies having a go, because you know what, I think it's worth it. And if you wanted to do a stripped back version with a very small cast, you could. You absolutely could, and you could do cut it back. I mean, it's not a short play, but it's not actually an excessively long play. It's only an excessively long play if you do it slowly, which is what happens with tragedy. People go, "I'm going to act now," and that makes me sad and slow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the length is an interesting issue as well, because I think Gascoigne and Kinwelmersh are often accused of kind of elaborating a bit on Dolce and making it a bit longer, which is, in terms of line lengths, in terms of the sort of line numbers, they do a little bit, but it's not kind of massive. But I think where it does come in is that the Italian line lengths are often shorter, and then they kind of become fairly uniformly iambic pentameter lines in the English verse. So you do get like just that little bit of extra time on the end of a lot of the lines. So I would really be interested in knowing, I mean, I'd love to see the Italian play as well, but it would be really interesting to sort of hear what the difference in sort of pace and timing.
Well, it's also how languages move at different speeds. So when they were doing in the early years of the talkies, they would record. They were filming different versions of the same film back to back with the same sets, but different actors doing different languages. And so the French version and the German version of a film are 10 minutes different.
Yeah,
because French just moves faster.
Yeah, I mean, both Gascoigne and Kinwelmersh are quite into alliteration. There's quite, and that does often have a sort of slowing down function. You have to kind of savor some of the ways that they're putting together these lines, which I think is much less the case in the Italian as well. So I think that's very true as well, that there's a difference there.
Well, we've gone on longer than I planned, but I was just enjoying it so much. So hell for me to edit later on, but delightful for the moment. It's been great. I've really enjoyed this. Any final thoughts or things and plugs for the future? So this will appear in print at some point in the future.
It will appear
or the past, depending on when people are listening to the podcast.
Yes, we're in copy editing at the moment, so it shouldn't be too long. Should be in the new year sometime that it eventually appears. I think I would reiterate that it's what I hope to get out of this edition is a little bit more accessibility for the text. I've done my best with the punctuation. It was quite hard to to do the modernizing process on it, and I'm still kind of changing my mind about some things. But hopefully that helps the modernized spelling. We've got kind of glosses, so I'm sort of hoping that this will provide a text which is just a little bit more accessible for people to get into and read out loud, put it on its feet, hear what this language is actually sounding like, and that we can sort of move beyond a phase of either kind of ignoring it completely or sort of dismissing it because, well, it's a translation of an Italian version of a Latin translation of a Greek play, and just kind of focusing on that distance between this play and Greek tragedy, very much at the expense, I think, of Jocasta, which is a wonderful play.
Well, on that note, all that remains is to thank my wonderful guest for being wonderful. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.